Third time now trying to record this. Sorry, I already recorded one video for chapter 24. Yes, 24 of Star Trek The Motion Picture. I did some ranting, some tangents. I said, you know what? I don't have much time to do much else tonight. Why don't I just re-record this? See if I can focus it. May happen. But I also just realized the second one, I was going good. I was liking how this is going. Why is OBS saying it's not recording? Apparently, it took the button click twice. Anyway, it's chapter 24. It is all written from V'ger's point of view. Very appropriate because we now have, thanks to Spock in the previous chapter, the knowledge that V'ger is a single entity. Machine entity, but single entity. Now, rather than talk about Spock right away, because we do get one thing that it's basically just for this one paragraph in the chapter concerning Decker. That Decker was interfering with the proper functioning of V'ger's probe. In case you don't recall, they were having sex in not the previous chapter, the chapter before, which apparently this is all happening at the same time. The probe signals were growing more and more erratic, and now the carbon-based unit seemed to be attacking V'ger's probe, whose signals had peaked into random nonsense. So V'ger doesn't understand sex. This does not make sense for multiple reasons, including one thing stated later on. That's technically me yelling at the book, but it still is. My criticism is legitimate. V'ger sent out the thought necessary to override the probe's malfunction, and found the thought insufficient. Puzzling. V'ger's own probe resisting V'ger's control of it. The resistance was futile. I'll come back to that too. The resistance was futile, of course, as the probe immediately began functioning properly. The carbon-based unit continued to attack, but it was easily handled since the probe was easily the more powerful of the two. And by the way, I was just like skimming a little bit at the first paragraph, chapter 5. It's like, so Decker's having sex with Ilea, and Ilea is now going to beat him up. But chapter 25 starts with, what's going on with Spock? It's like, I'm a little bit more concerned about Decker here. I was like, he's on the ship. In theory, they're not even fully aware of Spock's absence yet. And it's like, what was that noise? Anyhow, plus the whole thing with Decker technically might be mentally incapacitated now. Anyhow. So V'ger doesn't understand sex, is saying that, oh, Decker's attacking Ilea. Not attacking. Nope, not attacking. And it's like, okay, I can understand V'ger not getting that. But later on, it's talking about, V'ger trying to figure out what's up with these carbon-based life forms. Well, carbon units, because it doesn't recognize them as life forms yet. Excuse me. And it's like, is it possible that they're in a symbiotic relationship with this true life form that is machines? It's like, wait a minute. You understand the concept of a symbiotic relationship, but you don't understand sex? That doesn't make sense. It really doesn't, because I was like, where's V'ger encountering a symbiotic relationship? As it's been exploring the galaxy, in a way that it would recognize what that even means. Because if it only considers machines to be true life forms, why would it, if it sees two machines working together, and it's like, we might recognize them as two separate machines, but V'ger would be like, oh, they're working together. It's a single complex machine. It's like, there should be no concept of symbiosis there. But I could actually see it having the concept of sex. This may sound weird, but some of our modern AI machine learning stuff is actually based on sexual reproduction. Certainly, genetic algorithms are, but I can also see adversarial models being factored in as well to have something very similar to basically sexual reproduction, but for algorithms. The genetic algorithm is basically, you take a program, you have it run, cool, it's working. Now we're going to take it and make variations of it, mutations of it. So now we got a bunch of mutants of it that are the next generation. Now we test those. What's the most successful? These are the most successful? Okay, we take those, and then we do mutations. I'm not sure if they necessarily have them crossed. I think that you could. So that it is actual sexual reproduction there. That is where I could see adversarial coming into play, where adversarial is like they would do this for image generation, image recognition, where have an algorithm generate an image, the other algorithm try to figure out, okay, is that a real image or generated image? And as it got better and it would feed information back, as it got better at generating the image, they would actually swap. So it would go back and forth, where the emphasis was. So that would be adversarial because they're trying to defeat each other. You could combine that and have something that would basically be the concept of sexual reproduction, where it is genetic information but provided by two to create a new life form that has some combination of them, not always the optimal combination, but a combination of them. So it's like, that absolutely could exist for a machine. V'ger should have a concept of that and not be like, oh, he's attacking her. It's like, it is weird. Because a lot of, and I was saying this in the previous recording that wasn't recording, so hopefully it was then, I'm not repeating myself now. I have an issue with how V'ger is portrayed here, in that a lot of its personality seems to be contrived. V'ger would make absolute sense as great knowledge, zero understanding. Where, like, it may have an image of a library, an image of a book, but it doesn't understand a book holds information, or a book has information in a certain way. Like, that's what V'ger should be. But if there's no understanding, then it can't understand the concept of a symbiotic relationship. And it's like, okay, it wouldn't necessarily understand sex either, but it's like, you could have that line drawn with, this is how V'ger works, but then it's, no, it does have some knowledge, it does have some understanding of this knowledge. It's like, that's why I said it's contrived, and it's annoying, because where's the line now? Where's the line where, okay, it makes sense that V'ger understands this, doesn't understand that. Where's the line, though? It seems like, it's, kind of more like this, where it's like, oh, well, Roddenberry wanted it to understand this, or understand this, but this stuff it doesn't understand, maybe because he thought it would just be funny. I don't know. And it's, contrivances are awkward, because personally, I always try to avoid them. That there is either some way that is explained so it ceases to be contrivance, or there is no way I can avoid the contrivance so it's just in there. And I actually have an example of that with The Children Many Gifts. It's not really a spoiler, but it kind of sort of is close to one at least. Acid is a contrivance. His existence, his creation, more so his creation, is a contrivance. I don't have a good explanation for that beyond, when first thinking about the story, acid was always part of it. So it's like, yeah, that is always how the story, that was always something the story was going to include, need to include it. Technically, it's contrivance. It's super fancy. There's other things where it's like, I don't necessarily have rigid explanations for how this has come about, and, well, that's just how it is, so moving on. Other things, though, that may or may not be explained in the... There might be some things in the book where, if you were to read it, link in the description. I do have a link to my author page in the description, so you can find it that way. And, sorry, it's getting late, and I'm having a little bit of a headache, so I'm losing my train of thought easily. There might be other things in there that appear contrived, but aren't actually. There's definitely moments in that where you're not getting all the information because the character you're following at that time, from their point of view, they don't have all the information. The information does exist. I have it. But it's not necessarily there, which will make the assigned reading videos for that story, actually any of the stories, fairly interesting for me to do. Anyway, let's get back to this story. So yeah, covered Decker. Also, I want to talk about the situation with Spock, because basically V'ger's like, a bug just landed on me. I don't really care, it's insignificant. Oh wait, the creator told me all information I must gather to ultimately return to the creator. Alright, what are you doing? Oh, it's a carbon-based life form. Well, carbon-based unit. Well, get ready to slap it. Oh, wait, hang on. I don't understand these things. So let me think about this a little bit. Oh, and it's Spock. Spock has an orderly mind. Unlike the others. I like that. Okay, you can live. Until I figure out at least what's going on with the carbon-based units. Then I'm gonna get rid of you. Okay, Question: how does he know that? How does V'ger know that the other carbon-based units have disordered thoughts? I mean, this is absolutely a contrivance here, because it's like, yes, Spock has an orderly mind. He's a Vulcan, kind of their thing. But how does V'ger know that Kirk doesn't, that McCoy doesn't, that all the humans don't? How does he know that? I mean, it's like the whole V'ger having a telepathic connection with Spock. It's like, why does V'ger have this? We don't know. Why would that then allow it to connect with humans who are not telepathic? Don't know. In theory, could have connected with Ilia, because she does have some level of telepathy. But that's never been mentioned. It's only been with Spock, only a Vulcan. So it's still, we have the situation of it's just saying Spock, well, V'ger is comparing Spock to these other entities that it has no ability to know what that comparison is. So it's annoying. I don't get it. I don't like it. One other thing before moving on, the resistance was futile. The next thing I'm going to read. V'ger did not encounter the Borg. Okay? V'ger is the Borg. It's a better way I'd put it. Because as I'm pretty sure I had mentioned in the previous video, some tried to have it be at least headcanon that the species that V'ger encountered that made it so powerful was the Borg. No. As the next thing will explain, that would not be the case. Plus, V'ger isn't old enough. But no, it seems more so like V'ger is the optimal version of the Borg. And like the resistance is futile, what was futile, and this is what I could see it being, that while working on TNG, somebody going through Star Trek lore read this and was like, you know what? It'd be interesting to have an entire species based on this. Well, we shouldn't make them completely mechanical. Let's make them cybernetic, so that way they have an interest in the humans, that, you know, to assimilate them, to make these purely biological into cybernetic. So it's, I can definitely see that being the case. But anyway, let me hang on. Let me read this, which is getting background on V'ger, which some of it doesn't actually. The start of it doesn't make sense. The great machine had begun its long journey on the far side of the galaxy from here. Well, no, your journey actually started at Earth. This is something you're aware of. So you left and you came back. Maybe it achieved consciousness far away. Well, initial consciousness, and then it grew, as the rest of this will continue. Its consciousness was dim then. So it's like when it first gained consciousness was out there, but it originated from Earth. Which is funny, because it's aware of that. But it's like, oh, my journey started over there. It's like, you were created here. Your journey started here. Your consciousness formed here, and then it became bright here. But, sorry, there you go. So I'm not so often going off the edge. Anyway, hang on. Okay. Its knowledge and its power had been far less than now. It was not long after this beginning that a small life form had almost ended V'ger's journey. It had been scarcely 4 times larger than this one which calls itself Enterprise, and had attacked suddenly as V'ger passed near a small solar system. Knowing what V'ger actually is, that doesn't make sense. 4 times larger than the Enterprise is a hell of a lot bigger than the original V'ger body. So, unless there is more here, more to its creation that we don't know yet, which I don't think makes a lot of sense, but we'll find out. We'll find out. But it's like, no, even the Enterprise would dwarf the original V'ger. But moving on. Somehow V'ger had survived and repaired its wounds. Exactly how, unsure, but moving on. And the need to survive had forced it into a first flicker of conscious reasoning. It had realized that it would be guilty of disobeying the Creator's commands if it allowed itself to be destroyed during the journey ahead. It knew, therefore, that it must draw upon the knowledge it had so far gathered and use it to begin giving itself more strength to defend itself. V'ger had returned to the planet of its attackers and patterned it completely. This is why it did not encounter the Borg, or at least this is not the Borg, because patterning it completely means it killed everything. The information would replace what had been lost during the attack. It would make it possible for V'ger to continue the journey and its task of collecting knowledge along the way. V'ger omitted not a fragment of what had composed that world. except of a kind of carbon unit which existed there, but these had ceased functioning by the time Vidra noticed their existence. Basically, it was stepping on ants, not realizing they were there, and then it's like, oh, there were ants here. I should learn about... Oh, wait, they're all dead. From Vidra's point of view, that's how it went. And I guess it is possible that it encountered a species prior to these events, but it's not being said yet, so I'm not counting that as being the case. But that would technically mean it would be that it could have encountered the Borg earlier and then this happened. But one problem there is, why would the Borg repair and then release a thing? Their whole concept is assimilation. They feed. So they would feed on Vidra, and Vidra would just become part of the Borg. So it doesn't actually make sense there. Yeah. So I'm sorry, but the people that are like, oh, Vidra must have encountered the Borg, it's like, no, it didn't. The Borg were not a concept yet. Borg wouldn't become a concept for over a decade, because this is 79? TNG started in 87 or 88, and it was third or fourth season when the Borg appeared, so it would be like, a decade later. So, yeah. So I find it annoying, people trying to come up with a grand, unified theory of Star Trek, essentially. To have it all connected. It's like, nah, that's not how it works. There was no intention of having it be unified like that to begin with. You trying to force it together doesn't achieve that. Now, without like retconning things, which I guess you can do that for your fan fiction, but fan fiction isn't the original. Sorry. Anyway, Vidra had almost patterned it before Enterprise had finally called out its startling claim that it had come from the home of the Creator. So I looked back at chapters 26 and 27. This is false. This is false. When Vidra was almost going to pattern it and then stopped the second attack, all that the Enterprise had sent out that got Vidra to stop was its friendship lingua code, which was described as being pi, molecular information, and the speed of light. None of which identifies it as being from Earth. Kind of a problem. Because it's, now stating, oh, you said you're from Earth, that's why we're going to be friendly. It's like, we never actually said that. Oh. Huh. It's like, legitimately, this is wrong. I think technically Kirk may have had been trying to say we are, this is Captain Kirk of the United Starship Enterprise from the planet Earth. It's possible it had said that. But it was stated it was the friendship lingua code that was transmitted to Vidra, not his message. So, sorry, this is wrong. Because they didn't have time to even translate what Vidra had said. They just had to transmit something, and it was the friendship code. Vidra asking the question of basically why is it that these carbon-based units exist? Even the question of was it some sort of waste material excreted by life forms, mechanical life forms? Which then led to, was it possible that life could contaminate its own world without realizing it? And it's like, is this some environmental messaging? It could be. To be honest, that line could be. But at the same time, it is a single line. That this is now repeated later in the chapter, maybe later in the book, but not in the chapter. It's like, is that possible? Yeah. Yeah, I have no idea why Vidra would think it wouldn't be. I mean, that would be like, in Star Trek, this concept of tracking vehicles by their ion trail as they were moving. It's like, technically an ion trail would be considered contamination, and Vidra might be releasing that. So, yes, congratulations, you have in fact been contaminating the environment. I mean, it's also one of those funny things where it's like, technically it depends on what the hell do you consider contamination. So, yeah, yeah. Because that is definitely something that, and even in real life, you do see people basically saying, well, this is where we start counting things. It's like, well, you should be counting it over here to actually have the full picture. It's like, no, we're counting here, because this way, this is contamination, then, well, this is the stuff that shows it's not, but yeah. These particular units appear to be living in some sort of symbiotic relationship with Enterprise. Was it a relationship helpful to true life? So, mechanical life, or were carbon-based units parasitical in nature? So it's, like I mentioned before, Vidra has a concept of symbiotic relationships, but doesn't understand sex. That doesn't make sense. I mean, it really doesn't. I mean, it shouldn't, because also, why would Vidra, if there are two machines, did I say, I may have always said this, but I'll say it again. If Vidra sees two machines that are working together in a symbiotic relationship, that's not going to be, oh, those are two machines in a symbiotic relationship. That would be no, that's one machine that's just complex. There's multiple parts. I may look at it and be like, oh, yeah, that's two separate things, but no, why would Vidra think that they're separate? So, yeah, I guess that kind of works. Because I got a computer down there. I'm just thinking the various components there. Putting them all together, I get a computer. But technically, it is a symbiotic relationship in that it is multiple machines, electronic machines, but still machines, that are connected together to produce to create something new. But to Vidra, looking at that, wouldn't see separate components, might realize that things can be removed, but that doesn't mean that it's not a single entity that things come out of to be repaired or replaced or upgraded, but would see it in, like, I guess that actually, well, like, if you take your hand off and put another one on, so we can't do that, but to Vidra, it might be like, well, that doesn't change the entity, or, like, the glasses are part of me because they correct my vision, but it's like, does Vidra have any understanding that this is not part of me because I need it to properly see? It's like, this is like what my body actually makes me to be, but how does Vidra know that this isn't my body because it's always there, except when I'm sleeping? Yeah, what it ends on, the end of the chat, there's a little bit after the highlight, as you can see, but this definitely seems to just be Roddenberry being Roddenberry, which is kind of disappointing because the simple thing to put it is his philosophy seems very weak, which is disappointing. But anyway, let me read this, and it's a philosophy that is already well known about Roddenberry. Not necessarily that it's weak. I'm calling it weak right now, but yeah. Vidra faced a primal dilemma. It could not disobey the commands of the Creator, and yet it would have no reason to exist once it had obeyed all the Creator's commands. Nothing could exist without function or purpose. Vidra's command is collect knowledge, return, and give it to the Creator. But it's like, what happens when that's achieved? As it happened when first attacked long ago, Vidra again facing a threat to its survival. But now Vidra had become fully conscious, powerful, and knowledgeable. Although Vidra could not disobey the Creator had given no command that Vidra be content with his fate. And as happens eventually to every life form that this is very much a Roddenberry type thing. And as happens eventually to every life form that evolves far enough, the great machine had begun to think analytically about itself and its Creator. No, that's not what everybody thinks, Roddenberry. Roddenberry believed in utopia. The Federation is meant to be that. And an aspect of it, from his point of view, was that humanity would reach a point that religion would cease to exist. So, not necessarily full-throated, religion is the opiate of the masses, but it does seem like that's what he believed, that it serves a purpose, but once everyone is well-fed, and that is achieved with ease, that then there's no more need for it. This would be false, but as I said, his philosophy is weak. Because there's also the whole, there's still purpose to life beyond that, and religion is something that can give the purpose directly, or can help give the desire for the purpose, and define what that desire should be. I mean, it's like there's many functions there, even being so analytical. But no, he's very much that's what I'm reading there, and it's also weak because what greater thing can there be, greater achievement there be than to fulfill your purpose? Vidra is in the unfortunate situation of knowing what that purpose is, whereas humans, as I've said multiple times before, I'm Catholic, so believe in Christian God, Judeo-Christian God to be more accurate there, and it's like, do I believe I have a purpose? Yes. That he gave me? Yes, he gave me a purpose. I absolutely believe that. Do I know what that purpose is? Nope. does make it frustrating when life is not going the way I wish it were. But all I can really do is just be like, well, I know there's a plan. I know there's purpose. I just need to be as prepared as possible so that when the opportunity arises, I can respond to it correctly to actually fulfill my purpose. I will also add one other thing. One of the books I read before starting all these was Le Mort d'Arthur, so The Death of Arthur. And one thing interesting in that, I think I mentioned before. Yeah, because I would mention in regards to Star Wars as well, that Lancelot was the greatest of all knights of the Round Table, and potentially he could have gone on the quest to find the Grail and succeeded. However, he committed sin, which made him unworthy of it. However, his son Galahad, who was a greater knight than Lancelot is still defined as the greatest knight. Galahad is his superior though, but Galahad was also sinless in regards to how the story goes. So he is actually worthy to find the Holy Grail and does. Lancelot could not. So there is the idea of, well, Lancelot potentially failed his purpose, but it then just passed on to his son. So it's like, it is still possible to fail your purpose, but it is also things still get turned towards that purpose being fulfilled. Because the reason Lancelot failed his purpose, the sin, was he was in love with Guinevere, King Arthur's wife. This is an adulterous relationship. That is wrong. It is sinful. But it ended up getting turned so that Lancelot would produce Galahad. Because there was a princess whose father was also a magician, a great sorcerer, and she loved at first sight with Lancelot, and he had rescued her. And, well, what they did is they conspired so that she would appear to be Guinevere, invite Galahad up to a night of pleasure. He then left, not realizing that he had in fact not been with Guinevere, but been with this princess, and she was now pregnant with Galahad. He did not realize that until Galahad actually came. Actually, wait, it may have been earlier that it was mentioned, because it was also, I think it was also that, so Galahad's grandfather and I'm pretty sure his mother also did die relatively early in his life, so he was raised somewhere. I don't quite remember. It's been several months now. But I don't quite remember. But still, it's the idea of purpose will be fulfilled even if you do fail to achieve it yourself. It will continue on. In that case, through the son. In Star Wars, there's also that kind of Vader, Anakin was Lancelot, Luke is Galahad. I think you can also argue that Vader, in fact, did still fulfill his purpose. Luke's purpose was related, but was a continuation from there. Well, the next step, I should say, in the purpose, not the same purpose. Anyhow, but yeah, so Vader kind of is in that unfortunate position, but is also afraid. I mean, it is fear. I think it may have even. Hang on, let me just check. I think. Yeah, just that it was troubled by the realization that once it delivered its information, the information it had gathered, that it would cease to have a purpose. And all things that exist must have a purpose, must have a function. It's like, well, yeah, but that, I mean, it's, again, Christian, there are some things that, yes, they exist. We don't know why. We don't know the purpose. We don't know the function, but it's also not for us to understand. We don't need to understand. In kind of the whole... Is that it? No, that's not quite it. Not the lilies of the field. They neither spin nor toil, yet they still produce such beauty. No, it's more so the whole... crap, I don't quite remember it perfectly. But the idea that not even a sparrow need go hungry, like that there is plenty here kind of thing, where it's like everything's taken care of still. So it isn't as though nothing is without purpose. No, it is all there. And sometimes it is just, it needs to be there for something that we're not seeing, but it is there. So anyway, trying to come back to it, because I know I'm getting a little off track and headache plus tired. But yeah, so it's just Vidra is afraid and is starting to think, oh, I'm powerful enough that I can try to control the creator. And do that to avoid reaching an end. You know, it's afraid of its death, even though it doesn't necessarily understand that it doesn't need to die. I mean, it could even just be a, hey, creator, here you go. What do I do now? Can you tell me what I do now? Can you please tell me what I do now? I mean, technically it could. Why not? But yeah, it is just acting out of fear, because it's also, if it's going to be afraid that it's not going to tell me what to do, it wouldn't think to ask, kind of thing. You know, rather, if it's afraid that once it no longer has a purpose, its existence will end, then it's also going to be afraid that if it asks, it will not be answered. So, yeah. I did look a little bit at the first chapter of chapter 25. Sorry, first paragraph of chapter 25. And I don't much care for how it starts, because Decker is on board the Enterprise and apparently just got beat up by Ilea while in a very awkward position. But it starts with, what's Spock doing? Like Kirk being like, what is Spock doing? It's like, Decker is on the Enterprise and is in a situation now. Spock has left the Enterprise, and we're technically not sure that the Enterprise is aware he is left. I am like, you know, seriously, what the hell's going on with Decker? Is he okay? We're gonna get the answer eventually, because Decker does reappear. But technically, it could also be one could also argue, did Ilea just kill him? I was like, the Ilea probe is more powerful, that is stronger than he is. It's like, yeah, tore through Durasteel, which means it is entirely reasonable she did something to him that would have killed him by accident. Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm not super happy with how the story is going. And as I said at the start of this video, first time I did this was at the end. The whole Vidra's feeling so contrived. Its personality's feeling contrived, where it's just, instead of being a line where this is what makes sense for Vidra to do, this is what doesn't make sense for Vidra to do, or for Vidra to know and not know, Vidra to understand, not understand. Instead, it's like, nah, I'm just being whatever Roddenberry wants it to be, and I don't like contrivances. And I'm technically enough of an asshole with it that's like, nah, I'm gonna be like, that isn't how this should work. Alright, see you next time.